Gonna get the TP in to try to pop back in. As Sasa actually going right in immediately. Pop this Oscar trying to get the DPS down on that YCX. His homie was there, and it made absolutely no difference. But now Sasa able to get decent wave down, but as he's thinning this out, he's able to flash away from the damage from Awesome, and it doesn't matter at all.
Currently occurring.
Now YXL, he might be next on the menu. I hope you like
EDG
gets smothered. He had no shot out of that. Absolutely brutal. ZDZ put him on a poster.
They might actually just
burning
grab it and then look to turn.
Oh, Ash Arrow through. It's going to connect onto Sheer. The steal is taken. Xiao Hao rescues the Baron for EDG, and now all Barts are off.
For this year's tournament, then let's catch you up on what y'all missed, because there was a whole group stage that happened last week for over 4 days, and from each group, one team was victorious out of their respective 4-team group, and they moved on to the playoff bracket, where we are now going to see throughout this week not only the quarterfinal stage, but also the semifinal stage. My name is Rafa. I am joined here for the first time where I'm casting with Demacia, Weibo Gaming's #1 fan, so I've been told. So it's already Christmas morning for me.
It's Christmas morning for you, is that it? I mean, hey, lovely to be here with you, mate. And like you said, yes, anyone who is familiar with me, Weibo and I, we have a very tumultuous relationship, shall I say.
Nice.
You know, but that said, hopefully that relationship can continue to be repaired as we, you know, travel through the rest of the Demacia Cup. As so far, I've been relatively impressed with how they've been getting on, and of course, how they've been getting on throughout summer, and then throughout Worlds, and now hopefully starting off their journey here today. Very good as well.
So far, so good. I mean, we were going to get their very first looks again today against EDG. It has been quite a while since we've seen Weibo Gaming after their exit from the World Championship just a couple months ago, and, you know, not without their own roster changes. But we're going to go over EDG's own roster changes, because we got a chance to witness their gameplay in their own very respective group, where they were victorious 3-0, exiting out of the group stage in the 2024 summer season. This was their roster, where it was pretty much a whole roster rebuild around Wink heading into this tournament, Demacia.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's been following the EDG story knows that their roster has been fluctuating, I think, for the safest possible term I could use. For a little while, we've had a complete shuffle yet again. Wink still remains, but we've got a lot of very sought after, actually, frankly, I think, throughout a lot of the off-season and recent off-seasons too. Anyone who's familiar with Assume as well, coming out from RA, will remember that for a short time, despite being on RA and RA struggling for a little while, as an ADC, he was sought after as a low-budget option, and seeing him now on this EDG lineup, where you've got a very experienced duo in ZDZ and Xiao Hao, and then Angel in the mid lane, it's a roster that can work, and so far has been here at Demacia Cup.
Definitely has some potential behind it. Obviously, most of the individuals highest highs outside of maybe Angel, you know, notable world finalists for Suning Gaming in 2020 against Dam1. But of course, their opponents are going to be Weibo Gaming here, Demacia, and they are also a roster with their fair share of changes as well.
Yes, yes, they are. I mean, seeing Tien and Hong join this roster is a very, very interesting set of moves, which does kind of make me wonder where they're going to be at on a macro level, but then also kind of, right, jungle support, typically, they are the engine of a lot of teams, right? They are the communication structure in a lot of teams comparatively, so seeing both the support and jungle change at the same time, it does not necessarily worry me, but it's always interesting to see how teams that make that change at the same time are actually going to land on their feet. For me as well, on top of that, Tien, well, at least with Top Esports, very slow, very meticulous team. They like to play up, you know, build up play. Again, very slow and prepared. Whereas Hung, despite being slightly more reined in than his younger self, is a complete psychopath at times. So I'm very curious about what exactly is going to be the true form of this duo. And today is probably going to be a very, very solid opportunity to look at that, because again, on the opposite side, Xiaohao, very aggressive in his own right, and Wink is a natural playmaker too. So I expect this jungle and support matchup as a duo is going to be very, very explosive, especially when you look towards the mid lane where typically you're going to see a lot of rooms happen.
Sure. And for EDG, they have the benefit of already getting some stage reps for them, already starting to build that synergy towards the 2025 season. Whereas with Weibo Gaming, we have no information whether they've gotten a chance to really scrim before, but we do know for certain that this will be their first time playing in a competitive match together on stage. So seeing if Tian and Hung, being the two newcomers to this roster, if they can also build that synergy, then that could be the foundation for a very explosive and exciting Weibo Gaming roster going into the 2025 season.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you, right? I think what's been great about this Weibo, lineup and, organization for the last 2 years following it has really just been the fact that it has consistently subverted expectations time and time again. And I feel like, a change like Tian and Hong coming in both from, fairly, well, maybe not by their own standards successful, but still, top 8s at Worlds, both of them respectively.
Yeah.
It's still gonna feel like a change where you hope it just brings a fresh perspective, right? A fresh kind of change in philosophy of how Weibo potentially end up playing the game throughout a lot of 2025. Whether it's going to be slower, whether it's going to be faster, because again, it feels like Tian and Hung are kind of like hot and cold water, respectively, is of course going to be seen today. But it does really leave you excited again when you think about the rest of the core still being here. Xiaohu and some people are going to obviously criticize Breathe a lot if you watched the rest of his year that wasn't Worlds. But when Breathe is on form, he is one of our stronger top laners here in the league. We've seen him peak at tremendous peaks before. It's just about whether or not he can maintain a certain floor on the opposite side of that kind of performance.
And so my question going into this matchup, Jamada, is how much expectation should we have for Weibo Gaming in Demacia Cup? Do we want them to come out the gate swinging in, high form? And if EDG take a game off of them, are we, already concerned, or are we giving them a little bit of breathing room as they, get adjusted to each other?
Yeah, definitely a little bit of breathing room. It is the Demacia Cup after all, not to say that teams don't take it seriously, because trust me, they do. But very early on in the team's life cycle, right? And as mentioned earlier, jungle support changes tend to be very infrastructure changing as far as how a team actually operates. So getting off to a rocky start isn't the worst thing in the world. It's always about how the bounce back happens, what learnings actually come from these games. But of course, getting an early gauge is also quite nice depending on what performances we actually get out of individuals. So it's very contextual, Ref. I think it's one of those things where, you really have to look at kind of the nitty-gritty details of prioritization on objectives, how things are built up, right? It's really analytical stuff. So I think for me, even if they do end up, losing, it's about how they lose. Do they lose gracefully? If they have a composition that needs to scale, again, that losing gracefully part, very important. If they have to stomp a team in 25 minutes, how does the early game execution look, right? These are the things I'm really looking at for Weibo. And again, especially with changes like Hong and Tian, those things, those changes should drive them to those successes a little bit faster than what we'd seen out of previous iterations.
Sure. And on the flip side, for EDG, while Weibo Gaming have their own expectations and things that they will be just dealing with as they adjust to each other and get their first stage reps together as a team, EDG has already played 3 games together. And for ZDZ and Xiaohao, even though, maybe Demacia Cup will not be the final word of whether this team is strong or not, this is an opportunity for ZDZ and Xiaohao, who were formerly on Weibo Gaming's roster, coming in and placing as far as, I think, the 7th seed, going into spring playoffs of earlier this year. It's just, as someone that did not, watch LPL all the way through like you and Mazel and the rest of the LPLers did, just catching up on my own history, it didn't seem like they had a disappointing run through the lower bracket. I mean, getting knocked out by EDG doesn't seem like the most disappointing thing in the world. That's a high order to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, when the change happened, it's a weird one to talk about because I also, at the time, was not fully like following the LPL still, just because LEC was eating up my time. But it was still strange nonetheless to see, right? But I think it's one of those changes where when you have the opportunity to pick up Tarzan and Breathe at the same time,
Sure.
You would be a bit amiss to not do it, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that Xiaohao and ZDZ were necessarily, playing bad, but when you then piece together the rest of the roster with the players that came in, right, that followed, it is a change that kind of just made sense. I feel like for both them individually, this is going to be a nice opportunity to, get that kind of revenge tour in, right? I think it's always a nice thing when you come up against an ex-organization that you used to work with, to get a win in the game. It's kind of just, it's a personal thing for a lot of players, even if they'll come into an interview and say, oh yeah, it's not on my mind. Trust me, they're thinking about it, whether they want to play Koi or not,
Right.
in interviews. So I think for them, again, nice opportunity to kind of just say, this is what you missed out on. Of course, they had their opportunities throughout summer. Now they have another opportunity here in the Demacia Cup.
There you go. And, for Xiaohao particularly, anytime you get a chance to take a crack at, any jungler that was a world champion, at some point in their career, that's always a nice thing to be able to, boost your confidence as you get ready for next year's competitive season. Just going down through Weibo Gaming's roster, one particular player that we've been very fond of putting the spotlight more on, and depending on how this series will play out, we might shift it even more, turn up the lights a bit more, is no pun intended, Light himself. This player over the years has seemingly had very consistent performance, always put in the work and always has done his job, but it just never seemed like he was reaching the highs that that consistency might be deserving of in a lot of the rosters that he's been on over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Light, the thing has always been that there's always been a player with a bigger story, right? A more covered story, a more coveted story on Weibo, at the very least in the last 2 years, right? 2023 was the Shy. Last year, a lot of it was about Xiaohu, realistically, actually, which was a nice kind of change of pace, which I'm not not necessarily mad about at all. But even if you go further back, right? LNG, it was Doinbi and Tarzan in the 2022 year, and Light was still performing very acceptably, I would say. But again, he's been one of these underlying carries who's been incredibly consistent, like you said, regardless of what meta we've had, because over these last 3 years, the AD carry meta has shifted tremendously. We've gone from hyper carries to lethality poke champions, to whatever mess we have right now. So I feel like Light has always been able to adapt. He's always been very, very malleable as a player. It would be nice, in a roster where I feel like there is less immediate carry power, to, actually get a little bit of time in the limelight. We'll see how Weibo actually decides to, again, operate. We're talking about a support jungle change here in terms of total roster infrastructure changes. Does that mean now that Light might actually get a little bit more time? I feel like Tien is an absolutely excellent jungler at enabling his bot lanes. He was throughout all of 2024 on Top Esports. So we'll see if that's the general philosophical change that Weibo actually come into this matchup with, enabling the bottom side for a change.
Sure. Well, to review a little bit of the group stage, Jamana, and highlight whether Light himself will have a chance to potentially pop off on those champions, for those that didn't watch the group stage, some of the most picked and highest presence marksmen were Varus, Ashe, and Callista. So one of those champions seems like, an exciting marksman to watch. The other two,
which one would it be, Rafa? Please do tell me.
Maybe the Ashe. It's so awesome watching people get slowed by multiple arrows that do no damage.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very exciting player. Like, I do hope that, again, as we move into 2025, and also just kind of on a more preliminary note, we're seeing a very large amount of changes to League of Legends, the game, that, you know, we end up with a much more exciting AD meta. I think that ADs have, you know, probably been a little bit frustrated with their role, especially in recency. But yeah, I think if we could move away from some of the poke champions we've had recently and back into hyper carries for a little bit, it would certainly be a little bit nice to watch, especially for pro play. I feel like it's that old formula that never really quite gets boring to watch unless it's the only formula that's happening in pro play at the time. As speaking of, we're here in picks and bans, and that one exciting champion, man, like, is gonna be banned away by EDG off rip, so we're not gonna see it out of him today at the very least for game number 1.
I'm not gonna lie, Jamana. I was not looking at the Callista ban, although that is a good call out. The Warwick ban, though, I think that is the first time I have seen throughout the entirety of Demacia Cup a Warwick actually hitting the ban stage. Because I have not seen any teams prioritize the champion despite him having an incredibly high solo queue win rate. And I've been curious throughout this entire tournament if any teams are going to experiment and actually bring him on stage. That's not going to happen in this game at least, but maybe it opens up. But with all the bans completed, Yamato, we have what seems like that. Hang on, this is a very new draft
I'm
graphic.
not sure what's going on with the graphic. We are, of course, getting our feed the way that we're getting it. So as it appears right now, Draven has been locked to the one side and Varus is locked on the other. I'm assuming that this is some kind of graphical issue that will be resolved hopefully soon.
Hang on. I think this is a side select.
Oh, of
1v1.
course, 1v1 side select.
Oh.
Yeah, I forgot. Right, yeah.
Oh, now the
makes
Warwick
way
and
more
Rengar
sense.
fans.
That makes
Add up.
way more sense. See, I forgot about this. I forgot about this awesome part of of draft here. So this is the 1v1 side select. We'll get a feed on this in a second, I'm sure. But if I did see the names right, it is the top lane that's playing the 1v1, and Draven on one side, Varus on the other.
Yeah. As a Demacia Cup newcomer, Jamada, do they do this every year? Do they do like 1v1 side select for these playoff matches?
Frankly, this is my first Demacia Cup
Oh,
as
shoot!
well that I've actively covered, so I wouldn't be able to tell you. I would make the assumption that the answer is no, and this is a very much a new thing, and I'm getting confirmation via Mazel that this is in fact new. So
This is quite exciting. Let's
I'm
go.
down. I'm down. I'm very down for a 1v1.
So who's doing the 1v1s? Is it
Well, it had Breathe and ZDZ on the graphic. So
they're just sending the top lane just to do it? All right, good
yeah,
Chad.
my assumption is it's just going to be the top lane, which makes sense when you think about it. Top laners spend the most time in isolation alone, shadow boxing. So yeah, let's get into this and hopefully it's pretty fun. I mean, just as a side note, Breathe has Draven, ZDZ has Varus.
Yeah.
This is technically and I quote winning matchup for Varus 1-to-1. That champion has absolutely ridiculous stats in those kind of situations where he gets to just kind of woe his opponent just because of the resets on the blight stacks. So
yeah.
I think you'll find it's going to be a little bit lopsided because he's also got the range advantage if he wants to just sit back with his piercing arrows as well. So depending on how this 1v1 goes, we could be here for a little while.
You know, it is a little surprising to hear because I guess I always, fear a Draven level 1 and never try to trade with him in almost most circumstances. But I believe you. I've never played a 80 carry 1v1 before. I'm usually clearing my camps and just hoping that none of my laners die before I can actually make an impact on the map. So I'm curious to see how ZDZ actually plays this matchup out.
Yeah, it is like you say, sometimes you're not always focusing on matchups, and I get that. It is definitely an annoying matchup to play. Here they are, they're running both towards the top lane, which makes sense. It feels right.
They're actually playing Summoner's Rift too, instead of just the...
Yeah, and our cams are still on screen, but I'm curious about what... Okay, so they're both Barrier Exhaust. ZDZ has Hail of Blades. And Brief has PTA. CDZ, if he... Ooh, okay. He's fine. But that's vision cleared.
Yep.
That's vision advantage in the bush for Brief.
Vision denied.
He's cheating.
I mean, it's all about that lane brush control. Now, for Breathe, I don't know how many times this man has actually played Draven, but for having the confidence to lock it in a 1v1 for the side select gives me a little bit of confidence that he's probably, you know, played it a few times in his warm-ups. Maybe, you know, if he and Xiaohu last year were scrimming together 1v1s, like, you know what, frick it, bro, let's just send Draven 1v1s, let's see what happens. How long can we, you know, keep up the axes going?
Yeah, there was that little time, of course, where Draven solo lane was a thing. Also, don't forget Varus top, very, very popular.
Oh my god, don't remind me.
Throughout last year's Breathe. Oh, big trade.
Early exhaust coming out from both of the marksmen here, and Breathe is just taking big chunks.
Ooh. Well, the big issue now for CDZ is that's both his summoner spells. Breathe has his barrier still, so he's just at an 8 health advantage. He's also still got the biscuit, and he's got his pot, which ZDZ has already chugged through, so ZDZ is in some trouble right now, Rafa. He is very, very far behind. And realistically, he needs the blight stacks unlocked, right? He needs level 2, he needs level 3. And then once he has all of his spells, he can really start to trade back with Breathe. But before then, it's going to be really, really miserable. And he misses that hail of arrows.
Yeah, good sidestep from Breathe to dodge a little bit of that poke. Because I think that's the only way that you can kind of climb your way back in this 1v1 from ZDZ's point of view. You have to be able to use the long range abilities in your kit and just try to chip away at this Draven, while early on in this lane 1v1, you don't have that much lifesteal and sustain, but if Breathe is constantly being able to freely hit the minion wave, I mean, a lot of this HP is already stacked back up, and he's gonna get a
They're
free
allowed to
piece.
reset? Okay, now this I did not know. ZZ isn't even going to be able to stop his base because he has to fund. And he missed the cannon!
Oh, no.
It's a disaster. I hope that was like, you know, a weird observer like glitch. The gold didn't pop up and he didn't actually miss it, but I fear he did, and now the observers are just being mean.
Yeah, they're focusing on every single CS. Come on, man. This is... ZDZ is trying his best, and Breathe is going to walk back to lane with an extra long sword, and for a Draven, that's going to hit even that much harder for ZDZ, who's now down effectively stats and a little bit of HP, while Breathe is fully topped off.
Yeah, he's got a level advantage right now. Mind you, Breathe, he could just get an easy run down here, and I think he is, Rafa.
Remember, no sums on ZDZ, so Breathe... The level advantage paid off in the end. He throws up his fist in triumph. And for Breathe, maybe the calculation was just a little off. He thought he had it with the barrier advantage, but no avail. Weibo Gaming will not take the side select. It is victorious for EDG.
It's the disrespect on those blight stacks, man. The way they reset, I'm telling you, it's so obnoxious in the early game. And it's one of those things where 1-to-1, it's just difficult. It's so difficult to ever overcome, even with, you know, an IM advantage. He was still the level down, of course, but he had barrier as well on top of that. ZDZ playing to his absolute limits there. Absolutely recognized what he was actually capable of being able to do. And yeah, wins the side selection for Weibo. Or rather, EDG. Apologies.
No, all good. Man, EDG. Well, that's a nice way to start off the series with confidence and momentum on your side, you know? Got the boys hyping you up in the chat afterwards. Top diff already coming out, probably. Maybe not, you know? We don't know how BM both of these guys are in a friendly banter, but, you know, it would be a fun way to start off a little bit of the pre-series banter, as now I'm curious whether EDG wants to prioritize blue side or red side. There's been obviously a lot of champions that we've been tracking over the course of the Demacia Cup. I think with things like Rumble on the table, Ashe priority also on the table. I know Skarner has popped up massively. I think he's only lost 1 game out of the 7 games he's been picked so far. So that could just be what EDG want to go for. Just get a huge priority team fight pick. I know for ZDZ had massive games on Rumble in the 2 times that he played him in his group stage, so a lot of options on the table here.
Yeah, a lot of options. The meta has for the time being, remained kind of similar to Two Worlds, seeing a lot of the same power picks. There have, of course, been a few hefty nerfs to some, but still making their way through here in Demacia Cup. And yeah, priority is always going to be quite interesting. Like you said, the Skarner I anticipate is going to be probably removed away on red side. And we'll see who is on what. So it will be EDG on blue, so they will be going towards first pick. And Weibo are on red. So CDZ wins out that blue side select, and we are into draft.
And 2 bans have already been taken off the table from both teams. Aurora, Corky, respectively, from EDG's side. And as we called out, Skarner, Rumble, both big power picks for blue side. No can do, not going to be picked at this time around. Maokai's the last ban from the side of EDG. Remember, there are still big 80 carry picks ready for the taking, but with the fact that only really Corky has been the one taken off, and it's a nice flex between both mid lane and bot lane, something tells me that it might not be one of the marksman picks, so that Weibo can leave the entire table open to pick from.
Yeah, I mean, hey man, Varus looked pretty good in that 1v1.
It did look pretty good! Are you advocating for Varus top for ZDZ in this opening game?
I mean, I'm not against it. I'll say that. I think Varus is a very powerful pick, but for the time being, it's just going to be Ashe first pick, and do expect that to be an assume pick, but don't be too surprised if it ends up in Wink's hands. Don't forget, we've seen historically quite a bit of Ashe out of Wink whenever it's applicable to a draft. Very consistent Ashe player at that as well. But for Weibo, it seems like hovering over this Cassandra for a little while, they've probably had their mind set on that, and it's about what the pairing is going to end up being with it. Will it be the jungler? Will it just be the AD to match? Again, Varus up and available, something that Light also himself a very competent player at, despite the display from ZDZ in that 1v1 just a moment ago. But we'll see where Weibo decide to go, just because, again, Cassandra says to me, very stable, potentially slow on the top side. Bottom side, though, could be very quick as we get this Kalista lock in. Very aggressive, and on my mind immediately, despite being into the Ashe, I'm starting to think what the lane swap scenario is going to potentially look like with the Cassandra there and with Kalista on the other side.
Personally, I would not be a fan of a lane swap, not because I think it's ideal or not, but because that means we would get not as much fun interaction between the two teams. But you know, that is just me. The Herald of Arcane, Mr. Victor himself, has been locked in for EDG as he was available from the ban phase. I think he's been banned not a ton, but quite an amount throughout the group stage. And the top lane pick for CDZ will remain hidden for now. More than likely, this Wukong will just be a jungle pick for Xiaohao. And that leaves Weibo Gaming to either lock in their jungle of choice, or if they want to get their mid lane answer into the Victor right now before the ban phase comes out.
Yeah, I think mid lane, not too bad. Jungle as well. I was about to say, you could also go support. And if you're happy with locking in something like a Nico, ban away 2 options that are going to make your life kind of miserable on the bottom side.
Sure.
And just kind of be happy with that. I also just want to call out, ZDZ is a player of many strange things as the Braum ban comes through, and that makes a lot of sense when you're dealing with an Ashe and you probably want to go in. Practiced Varus top in solo queue at the minute. Wukong is a matchup that's actually pretty good into the Cassandra 1v1.
Really?
The issue kind of arrives, though, that we're in pro play. If you get lane swapped on them, Wukong kind of just becomes a bit of a nothing burger in the top lane because he just doesn't have the economy to operate. So I will just plant that seed and leave it there for the time being. But I do expect it to be a Xiaohao pick. It's just that I have seen this matchup a few times out of high elo solo queue, and it tends to be pretty one-sided. This Wukong, when he actually gets lane economy, deals way more damage than he does in the jungle, and that's a scary thought to think about, even into a Cassandra. As I expect this to just be, you know, they might actually throw out the Sejuani ban or the no ban. I'm not sure what's happened there, just because of the hover previously, just to protect themselves from the potential of Ashe Sejuani run down with immediate support. When we get confirmation on what that missing ban is for, we will let you know. But Nocturne will also be the final ban. Very scary to deal with, right? Right now, Weibo don't necessarily have a lot of engage or setup. Vi obviously does both those things. Nocturne is an enabler of kind of just making it a lot easier for that Nico to access the backline with a flank.
Yep.
And maybe that no ban was to enable Weibo themselves to pick up the Sejuani for that engage.
They basically told EDG, hey, you either give us Sejuani or Nocturne on this rotation, you pick your poison. And I think EDG made the right call, because at least without the paranoia, you can still see when a potential Nico Pop Blossom is going to take effect, or when anyone else is trying to flank you if Cassandra comes in through a TP. Now, EDG, they are prepared for a lane swap if it does happen, Jamada, because the Udyr has been locked in, which we have seen as kind of one of those champions that can thrive in that scenario. With the Seraphine, though, now, I don't know if we saw any Seraphine throughout the group stage. There was one game. It was a loss. I don't know who piloted it, but I won't call them out for now. But we'll see if Wing can make a difference here. This is a lot of decent team fighting bruisers on the side of EDG, and with how long these fights want to be played out with champions like Victor and Ashe, I think having something like a Seraphine to give you multiple heals and shields and utility throughout the team fights makes you a powerful Juggernaut composition.
Yeah, it does, but it also has just given Xiaohu a very, very potent ultimate as well on the opposite side to try and chain in some of that engage. So I am very, very... I don't want to use the cursed word, but I'm very interested to see what EDG are going to do outside of the first 10 minutes of this game, right? I think a lane swap is going to be relatively easy to play out, right? You have Udyr, that's fine. Udyr's going to do the thing where you just walk mid, get level 2, walk to bot, and he just picks whether he gets to clear the wave with the empowered R or, you know, tank up a dive with the empowered W. Weibo, again, it feels like they're the ones with all the agency here. They're the one of the Kalista Nico lane, they're the one of the Sejuani, and Silas as well as a 2v2 in the mid jungle. Victor is, you know, we haven't seen him for a while competitively. He's here because, of course, of the recent changes. He's not really a champion for a little while. Like, it takes time for him to come online. So with all of this innate scaling and very big lack of early damage, I'm very worried about what EDG are going to actually be able to get done in this first 10 minutes. It's going to be a lot about, I said it earlier actually, but quoting the other side for Weibo, losing gracefully in these first 10 minutes and getting the gold where you need it, so that once, you know, Herald spawns up or the third dragon spawns up, you actually have an opportunity to play the game, because otherwise I feel like Weibo have everything they need in their arsenal to play out an early game aggressively, stomp it out, and then turn it into a mid-game transition where they just win.
True. And the cool thing for us, as we were kind of noting at the top of pre-show before getting into draft, one of the big things we wanted to look at for Weibo Gaming over the course of this series is this is our very first look at this new roster being put together, with Tian and Hong coming in as the new jungle and support. And this is a chance for showing how well they can synergize and play together on the map, where you are kind of expected to be the playmaker. You're the ones with the agency in your hand in the first half of the game. Let's see how aggressive, let's see how proactive they are against a team that is going to fare better the more time they are given to scale up.
Absolutely. And for me, I think the funny contrast and comparison is already here. Spoke about Tien being a very, you know, slow by the books jungler. At the very least, that's how he operated on top esports throughout a lot of this year. He's on the Sejuani. Through and through, just called Hong a psychopath in my analysis, and I'm happy to do things like that. On the Nico with the Kalista pairing, right? So a lot of early aggression is to be expected from this duo. We are going to be getting the lane swap out from Weibo. So we'll see how EDG respond, what this bottom lane state is going to end up being, how they stack this wave, and then of course ZDZ tanking the lane swap on the other side, and we'll track how homeless or not homeless he's going to end up being. As you can see, he's walking down towards that mid lane, should look to try and share some of the XP with Angel, hit level 2, and then try and catch that stacked wave up on the top side.
Yep. For the credit of EDG, they managed to plant a ward onto Tian's blue buff, so they have information on where he started, knowing that he went with a wolf start since he already has 4 CS to his name. And for Weibo Gaming, this jungler will be trying to path towards the top side on the map, playing towards the strong side where Light and Hong are going to be slowly stacking up that wave. And as you called it out, if ZDZ is going to try and catch that wave, he's actually teleporting right away because they stack that wave and crash it super fast. So CDZ just wants to make sure that he can catch all the XP. More than likely, he's not going to get that much gold from it, but at least he won't fall that far behind in lane.
Yeah, so whilst I was looking at the mid lane, the interesting thing was that Tien and Breve did the entire bottom side quadrant together instead of kind of like pathing up towards the top side and crashing on the third wave and then trying to deny ZDZ that wave with a dive. So we've now kind of ended up in a situation where both top laners are going to be able to catch a fair bit of CS, but still, I feel like Breve maybe getting the slightly worse end. ZDZ, I don't feel like he can be dove from 100 to 0, even with these three. If he can get his passive back up, that empowered W is such a nuisance to deal with. Still a few seconds away, but they're gonna start this dive off now.
All right, Hong tanks up the turret aggro. ZDZ gets knocked up. The spears, there's that empowered we were talking about. Hong, wait a minute, he's got the minion Nico passive.
Oh, but the healing.
But CDC's still healing because he's autoing Tien under the tower. But eventually, Weibo Gaming pull off the dive with no deaths on their side. First blood goes over to Light.
And honestly, a majority of that play just has to be credited to Hong using that cannon minion tech, right? Tanks up so many tower shots and it just enables them to get through ZDC's health bar. Even though he does so much work in staying alive for so long, it doesn't matter because Hong's just there tanking up maybe 5, 6 tower shots throughout the entirety of that dive. ZDC can't do anything to survive.
And that advantage that ZDZ might have had being able to get to the minion waves now seems to have disappeared completely because, yeah.
4, 5, 6, 7.
That is crazy.
Yeah. That mechanic might need to be looked into, perhaps, as a ZDZ unfortunate victim of that play, but it is very unique to Nico, of course. Not really much he can do. He did what he could. Still got a fair bit of XP, but of course will still be denied and didn't have teleport. Teleported back to the top side to catch the initial wave earlier on, so will be set a little bit further behind than his counterpart Breve on the bottom side, who's been relatively undisturbed as he farms up all these minions.
Yeah, you know, when you have Sejuani, Kalista, and Nico as your diving trio versus the power of Ashe, Seraphine, Wukong, you definitely have an easier time of pulling that off. And for EDG, even if they wanted to pull off the dive, I mean, it's just, you don't have guaranteed CC to keep Breathe in place so that it can be a successful operation here. And now ZDZ, as we were, you know, highlighting before, what might have been an advantage for him now has been evened up thanks to the efforts of Weibo Gaming's trio and Wink. I mean, he's been called towards the top side of the map because he knows that ZDZ is now, I don't want to say a liability, but he is prone to getting put further behind in this matchup.
Yeah, it's just going to be very difficult to play around. And again, this is why I was a bit skeptical of EDG's draft coming into it, because where is their agency really? And especially if they get lane swapped on, it just feels like, yeah, there just isn't any. You're relying on your scaling, you're relying on eventually ZDZ just getting tanky enough with some of the Seraphine shields that he can be frontline. And right now, Weibo doing everything in their power to deny this from happening. Another stacked wave, Xiaohu's here, and Tien's even on the way, but they're starting this dive off now.
I mean, he can grab the Seraphine ulti and have access to an Encore before Wink is even level 6 himself. And now Tien is going to roam on over. This is a 4-on-2. Encore hits onto both targets here. Wink is trying to body block so that ZDZ can survive, but he will fall. Xiaohu takes it, and Hung once again. Power of the cannon minion allows Nico to take up as many turret shots as he needs to, and this dive will take no prisoners from the side of Weibo Gaming unless Angel can find some salvation and redemption kill, but everyone else gets out alive because what can Victor do this early on? What is he going to do? Flash and Chaos Storm with practically no items under his belt? So this is a massive win for Weibo.
Huge win for Weibo. Execution at first was a little bit scuffed, but afterwards it was pretty much picture perfect. I don't think there was really any other major issue. Light here, you can see, you know, tanks up 2 more tower shots than he has to because Hung had to back out because he tanked tower too early after getting rooted. But Xiaohu here, 2-man ult, allows for Tien to also come in and help pick up Wink. It's just an excellent execution on this dive, and again, if Hong doesn't turn into a minion, that tower shot, you know, there's arguments that another would have killed him. So very, very good job, Weibo. walk out with everything they want. But they might not get all of these grubs despite all of these successful plays on the top side. As we come out of the replay, EDG are here on the grubs first. They don't quite have numbers for the time being, but the collapse is going to come in shortly.
They need to save an Angel. Hong gets nailed by the arrow despite flashing away. Xiaohao picks up that one. But Tian is going to take this moment to sneak over one of these grubs while the rest of EDG formed a death squad towards that top side. Xiaohu has returned to the river, takes the arrow for himself. But I don't think there's going to be an engage from Weibo Gaming. It's just going to try to use the arrow to disengage. But Tian's got nowhere to run, no time to flash. As Xiaohao pulls the trigger with that Cyclone now looking for Xiaohu. And Weibo Gaming might have bit off more they could chew. Xiaohao dashes over the wall thanks to the upscone abduct and breathes to force the flash. And Weibo Gaming don't drop any more losses in that fight.
It's 2 grubs and a few kills there for EDG. That's not too bad given how things were beginning to transpire on the top side of the map. For Weibo, just a little bit slow back to the grubs, right? Having just made that top side play, it makes sense. EDG would be back out onto the map quicker than they would be. And it's a nice injection of gold for EDG. When you actually take a look at the top side of your screen, it's only 200 gold between these two teams, despite all of the very, very successful dives so far for Weibo. And it all comes off the back of this pick up here, right? Trying to actually find their way onto Angel. They're not capable of 100-0ing him, and then Hong unfortunately just flashes into the arrow. Not much more else to say than that. And even though Tien steals away this one grub, they get collapsed on after the next grub goes down. Tien just stepping a little bit too far forward, and Xiaohao picks his man with some of the slows. The damage back is okay from Weibo, but again, it's not coordinated at the moment. There's no big Nico ultimate to nail in the backside of EDG here. The carries, the very squishy champions of EDG, so no other dive threat available.
And for EDG, even though that it's still very early on into this game where this composition hasn't really reached its full potential, its full power, you can already see a little preview of how this composition is going to be playing out these fights. As long as these guys are together and grouped up and bunched up, they all enable each other and facilitate each other to their maximum potential. And for Weibo Gaming, I think they just disrespected that a little too much, getting a little too excited after the, fruition of their first 7.5 minutes of gameplay so far. Now, let's see if Weibo Gaming can kind of rein in the horses a little bit and continue what was working for them. Because as you mentioned before, the gold lead has now been shored up thanks to EDG's efforts.
Could be seeing a play here mid lane.
Nice. Glacial Prison onto Assume. Xiaohao will try to deter the engage. Nice use of the Encore to lock up Light, but he takes out Xiaohao before they can get any damage back. Light is below 200 HP, and Hong might have gone a little too far forward. Assume using the power of those arrows in the slow, but Tian will now body block using his own body. Light goes in a little too far, but they take out 2 for the effort. And for EDG's bot lane getting absolutely obliterated, Weibo Gaming will walk away from the fight victorious.
3 for 1 for Weibo, and I mean, initially, after EDG get the first kill, you would have expected them to back up, but again, kind of over-chased on that exchange and get punished for it. It is Weibo that initiate this play, though, right? Sejuani ultimate comes in, Assume, though, not in really any massive amount of danger. The ultimates here, massive on both sides. Just about everyone gets slapped down. Weibo, though, happy to kind of chase in and Assume, just gets a little bit too anti, feeling like he can pick up Hung, and the damage just isn't quite there, unfortunately. And even though Light does go down, again, 3 for 1, the final exchange, it's definitely not worth it as we come out of the replay into a pause. And we'll see how long this one will take. Hopefully a short one at best.
Well, this gives us a chance to kind of recap and get a general overview of how the game is progressing so far. That was a decent shutdown off from Light, but for the side of Weibo Gaming, they can be thankful that it went over to the Seraphine and not the Ashe, which would have been more appreciated for EDG's efforts. But, you have a 4-1 Callista that is, snowballing quite effectively so far for Weibo. They did not get the first dragon. Credit to EDG for picking up a majority of the objectives, while Weibo Gaming were kind of giving ZDZ the business and the top lane island treatment. But for Weibo Gaming, do we need to see them now prioritize strictly dragons over the next few minutes, or are we just going to see them continuously try to stat check EDG in these lanes?
I think both are very viable. Dragons will definitely give a much more overlooming threat to EDG, but EDG already having picked up that first dragon just buys them so much extra time for the potential of scaling. So I think EDG are fine as long as they're the ones that keep their distance, right? I'm not really sure there's too much Weibo can do about it, because remember, it's Weibo that have to, you know, engage. It's Weibo, the onus is on them to force plays and actually make things happen. EDG are the ones with all the wave clear and the ranged engage, so they can kind of just sit back for the time being and wait for those next couple of items to roll in, right? First items across the board for the important members of EDG have already come through as 1v1 on the bottom side here. All out's been called.
And ZDZ will just run away.
Yep.
Awesome matchup. Now, Arrow from Assume hits Tien straight dead in the face, but no one else from EDG can safely walk up and threaten this objective. So that's going to be 4 Void Grubs picked up in total for Weibo Gaming. You know, credit to Tien for being able to steal 1 in the previous rotation. This will at least give them some extra turret splitting pushing power. And for Weibo Gaming now, they have to find a way to regroup back into mid lane. I don't know if through the river is the safest way for you, Xiaohu, but Tien forced to use the Glacier Prison to make sure that his mid laner is not completely dead to rights, and EDG, for now, have control of the mid wave, and they get the first rotation over to the second dragon of the game.
Yeah, and I mean, again, if they pick up the second dragon, it's a big deal, because then there's just there is no soul threat. And I mean, with Tien on the top side, it seems like that's just going to be the case. So there's 2 early dragons to the scaling side of EDG. Weibo, despite all of the early skirmishing power that their champions can be afforded, just haven't been able to find the time to, or haven't made the time to pick up those dragons. But this TP is going to come down. There's 3 members here and ready to dive ZDZ.
He flashes away, tries to buy as much time as he can, but with 4 members diving you, I don't know how long you can last, but credit to EDG. They bought enough time for Angel to pick up first brick on the other side of the map. So, Jamada, EDG, they're getting the objective game a little slightly better than Weibo Gaming. They're making use of hitting turrets faster than Weibo Gaming have, who picked up the 4 Void Grubs. I feel like we should be a little concerned for how Weibo Gaming's acceleration of the game state is going so far, because it's not going fast enough against a scaling composition like EDG.
No, it's not. And, you know, for the time being, the gold lead is nice. We'll again continue to track where Weibo are able to make things happen. A lot of that gold is inside of Light, right? We spoke about how we wanted him to kind of maybe take a little bit more of a central role inside of this Weibo roster, and the changes so far certainly has been 4-1-3, and on his way to that second item. Weibo have to make good use of this Kalista for the next few minutes, otherwise I feel like Light's usefulness is certainly on a timer as a Kalista into things like Wukong, into all of this range slow from Wink and Assume on Ashe and Seraphine, respectively. Weibo need to put their foot down and really find a foothold in this game before things start to really roll out of control here and EDG have too much scaling on their side.
Yeah, and you can already see, for Light's credit, how aggressive he is trying to play. You know, a lot of the early skirmishes and the all-ins, you're not seeing Light completely, you know, panic out of a fight. He is going forward, and he is even willing to risk his life, which has already happened once in the shutdown going over to Wink. But if Weibo Gaming can continue to rely on Light jumping forward, as Xiaohu is going to send an arrow mid lane, sails on wide. Doesn't look like any target is going to hit. It looks like they were aiming for Angel to see if Breathe could get that all out. Little shuffle into the turret and just get a free pick that way, or burn a flash, but no dice.
No dice for the time being. Always nice to see those attempts come through. And, you know, normally I actually spoke about Ashe being a very proactive pick. I'm not necessarily surprised we haven't seen proactivity out of EDG, but I wonder when they feel like they will start to be able to get that proactivity out of the pick, right?
Sure.
Again, I do anticipate we're realistically looking at a 2-item setup here for EDG. Second item for Angel, second item for Assume. That Mikhail's Blessing is in for Wink. You know, there to cleanse away that Sejuani ult. So, realistically, again, I just assume EDG sit here, wave clear. Ashe Seraphine in the mid lane, Victor on the side lane. He can just sit back, and even if Weibo try and start up an objective like Baron in 4 minutes' time, you've got the Hawk shot, you're going to have all of these vision, you know, resources to really make sure that your entrances are pretty much information filled as they can be. For the time being, though, Weibo trying to break this mid lane tier 1.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Well, Light was forced to cleanse the Ash Arrow, but the layering the CC from Wink was pretty threatening. Had anyone else from EDG been in range to follow up, they might have been able to force more out of Weibo Gaming's side, since he was stunned up for just a brief moment. But no, EDG will be content that they at least traded one ultimate that is a fairly low cooldown for a summoner spell off of Light, a minute and a half before the third dragon spawning, and 3 minutes away before Baron spawns. I want to take this time, Jamada, as I think both of these teams will not be fighting for a bit, to remind all of our viewers at home that now that we're in the playoff bracket stage, we are playing full Fearless mode. So that means after this game, none of these champions will be available to pick from going forward in the series.
Yep, that's true Fearless mode. So, again, very kind of exciting for EDG to come out with things like the Seraphine support early on, because now it just means that, you know, game 2, game 3, we just end up with Nautilus and Leona and the fun stuff we've seen for.
You get that Braum again, yeah.
Yeah, you get the Braum again, hell yeah. Like, lock that in. That's what gets me going when I see support matchups, man.
You don't have to lie to me, you know, it's understandable, you know. I think you've already done your fair share with saying how you are such a #1 fan of Weibo Gaming earlier. You know, I did appreciate that.
Yeah, I love Weibo. Weibo are amazing. Yeah, that's the extent of my love for them. That's all I'll exclaim for right now. But I mean, I do kind of love how EDG are playing against Weibo right now. Can't say I love much of how Weibo are kind of navigating this mid game, but I don't blame them. They're really being kept at an arm's length here by EDG. EDG just kind of fulfilling their role. They're really understanding what the win cons are for Weibo, and they're doing an excellent job of denying that away. And as they start up this dragon, this is where it could get dicey. This is the opportunity really for Weibo to try and pull the trigger and find a successful fight.
There's some good wards for TP flanks if Xiaohu wants to pull the trigger, and that's what exactly he is going to do. Not sure which ultimate he's going to grab, but if he's got the pick of the litter, Encore would be great from this angle, and Ash Arrow could single one target. Hong goes in, Pop Blossom on a 3. Here comes the fight. Xiaohu tries to flank, but EDG immediately turn on to the flanker, and Xiaohu is getting singled out by Xiao Hao. He's forced to flash over the wall, but Weibo Gaming pushed through the other side of the fight, taking out the main frontliner ZDZ, and now it's a 5-on-4 advantage for the side of Weibo.
Yeah, I mean, Weibo, this was their opportunity, right? They've got this big gold lead. There's that IM advantage on Light. This was the window they needed to pick up a team fight win, and they do just that. EDG, I think, just overplayed their hand a little bit. I think they've been so comfortable. They've coasted through the last 10 minutes because of how some of these skirmishes have played out, that they just felt like the setup was there. And frankly, it wasn't too bad once they'd shut down Xiaohu's flank, but it's just Hung getting this 3-man ultimate on the front line and really buying the space that Weibo needed, along with Xiaohu, for, again, Light to just open up, right? Takes down the frontliner. There's not really much CDZ can do. He's just being good at it in the middle of 3 members. But as we come out of the replay, Assume's dead.
And it doesn't stop. The momentum has started for Weibo Gaming, and now multiple summoner spells were used in that previous fight. So they find Assume a little too far forward, immediately pouncing on the summoner-less Ash. And now Weibo Gaming, they have an opportunity to at least get control of Baron. I don't think they'll start it up, or at least...
No, I think
You know what? I'm a liar. I'm a liar.
Has teleport. This is a pretty good angle. It's a 2-IM Callista on, you know, the 20-minute mark. This Baron is, you know, tankier than older iterations, but still very easy to take down. And I just don't think there's anything that EDG can do about this. Assume can send out a Hawk Shot on an arrow. That's going to give them a little bit of information, but at 5k already, Rafa, this thing's gone.
Xiao Hao would have to pull off a miracle, 2k HP. He can't get into the pit. Hong doing a great job of body blocking him and ensuring he does not get into the club. Weibo Gaming now should be able to have a clean reset on this Baron, and still 3.5 minutes before the next dragon spawns. And the fact that Weibo Gaming not only stalled out the fight to get the third dragon means that they don't have to deal with a potential soul point for EDG. Weibo Gaming have now seemingly gained firm control of the game, a solid 5,000 gold lead to boot, and at a better time, or probably the best time to do it, because this is now where those 2 item spikes are coming online for EDG. If Weibo Gaming are able to beat them now, this could be a couple fights away from a Weibo Gaming win.
Yeah, it certainly can be. And we know, asked for Weibo to put their foot down a little bit, right? Make some plays. And even though EDG kind of offered them up that Dragon fight, being able to find that pick, that mid lane tier 1, and then immediately transition it into a Baron is the kind of decisiveness that Weibo needed to have with this kind of composition. They really need to make the most of this Baron, right? You're talking, at the very least, try and crack open this bottom side tier 3, I think, is likely going to end up being the transitional play here for Weibo, as a wave is being moved in by Breathe. And it doesn't really seem like they're going to be able to get too much chunk damage out of this mid lane tier 2. Let's see what they can actually get done down here on the bottom side. Because again, the scaling threat, the wave clear as well, is going to, again, regain its power as soon as this Baron is lost.
Arrow flies, it hits Tien. Xiaohao's gonna go in, tries to lock down the tank under the tower, force the flash away, but Xiaohao gets completely annihilated. But the amount of damage that Weibo Gaming were able to put out as Light rips 1,000 spears out of the Monkey King's back. And now EDG, without a jungler, don't have really any more engage tools, as they used pretty much everything here, Jamada.
Yeah, they did, and it still seems like Weibo are gonna get the most out of all of this. 2 tier 2s, mid and bot. There's a top wave being pinged as well, so we'll see what Breeze is gonna end up doing here. As the arrow lands onto ZDZ, teleport's coming in as well. Breeze is very tanky Cassante.
Yeah, tanks it up and barely loses, I want to say, more than 1/5 of his HP. Still has about 3/4 to play with. Hong goes in, forces a couple of summoner spells out of the teammates of EDG. They lose the inhibitor tower, but now have all 5 members once again. But meanwhile, Xiaohu in the mid lane, pressuring for that middle exposed inhibitor. These are 2 open structures now that Weibo Gaming can look for, but they've used a fair share of their tools. They don't want to have to risk anything else, but they have taken a crack open at the base for EDG, and now are setting up the pieces for a potential win here in game 1.
Yeah, I mean, job's done for the Baron. Cracked open the base, that's what they needed. With this kind of composition and this kind of, you know, game state that we're in, moving into them picking up that Baron. And this Dragon, just kind of a, you know, not a necessity. What am I looking for here? It's just going to happen now that the side of EDG have been pushed back so far, and then they can just look to continue to suffocate EDG out of this game. It's going to be super difficult now that you're, you know, lacking so many structures, so many bastions of safety to be able to kind of step up to waves and wave clear for EDG. This is where the game gets hard to play when you've got this kind of scaling composition. You have no towers, you can't just kind of neutralize the game at mid lane tier 1 or a mid lane tier 2.
Yeah.
You have to sit really, really far back, and it just affords Weibo so much space.
Yeah, and for the first time, we're starting to see, you know, drastic item differences in a lot of the carries for Weibo Gaming versus EDG. Light having finished 3 items and the Terminus, that makes any marksman that buys it so deceptively hard to kill, because you are getting so many resistances off of the stacks as you ramp up. And so now for, you know, EDG, a somewhat low damage profile from the side of the bot lane. Now you have a Kalista who is extremely mobile and even tankier to kill. And Weibo Gaming pretty much have everything they need to close this game out off of one more solid fight. And I have to say, Jamada, Hong has looked really damn fun to watch in his first game with this Weibo Gaming roster so far.
He's willing to pull the trigger, man. That's the thing about Hong, you know. His 2023 year in particular was one where he really opened the eyes of a lot of LPL watchers. And then this year, he was a lot more restrained, a little bit more calculated, but still very aggressive. And speaking of aggression, Breeve's gone forward here. He could very easily be taken down, and I think that is going to be what happens. Though he's Cassanteing.
He's so damn taky, man. I mean, he finally goes all out and is just now dropping below 50% HP, and he still doesn't die. Meanwhile, Xiaohu is just wondering, hey guys, y'all doing good over there? And he's like, I'm taking this turret on the top side of the map. Breathe has done his job. His teleport is not coming up for quite some time, so he cannot rejoin if Weibo Gaming wanted to continue the siege. But Baron is spawning in the next 50 seconds. They've done what they can, and now getting that base in and getting ready for a Baron take that should give them the tools ready to make another siege.
Yep, that mid lane inhibitor is going to be big. Couldn't quite find that bottom side one. Who's going to get the last hit? Okay, you know, the observers, they have to hover over that to make sure that 90 gold is being picked up. But the Baron, right, is going to be where the focus will now be for Weibo. And again, when you really kind of take a bit of a zoom out, EDG just do not have, you know, that much information for the time being. Yes, they have that ward on the Baron, but it's going to expire very, very soon. And actually, Weibo, they're just looking to pull the trigger potentially. Xiaohao is going to use that clone out. So once that ward's gone, they're really going to be working with just about nothing. And again, you've got Hawkshot, yes, you've got a blue ward, cool. After that, you have to start sending bodies in, or you just don't know what's happening. This Ash Arrow is just going to fly barely wide on Xiaohu. And that's kind of that was their real only option in. If that arrow hits, then great, they can really try and take a foothold, get that pick, walk into the jungle together as 5 after they deal with their waves. Without that, now Weibo just kind of get to sit here in fog and be very, very threatening. And if you split up like this, EDG, one person getting caught out, you just lose the game.
Yeah, remember, EDG's composition is stronger when all grouped together. If they're ever split up, as Xiaohao was trying to look for the flank on the right side, and Weibo Gamer is just going to pull the trigger. Han! Pop Blossom! Flash over the wall! That's going to set up the engage, and Xiaohu is completely isolating Assume from the rest of the fight, cannot assist with any of his fellow EDG comrades. The fight completely won and absolutely dominated by Weibo Gaming in a stellar Game 1 performance, and they'll be taking the first game of the series.
What an engage from Hong. 3-man helmet on the front line to really just put the nail in the coffin of EDG, and that will be Game 1. Weibo, after the first 20 minutes, I was a little bit worried, but once they had that opportunity to pick up that Baron, it was all go, no breaks, and they will be moving into game number 2, 1 up over EDG.
For me, this would be a fun moment for Breathe to type in all chat, you know, 1v1 doesn't matter, you know, and just kind of set a little more pre-banter for the rest of the comrades. But, you know, probably all business from the side of Weibo Gaming. And for the rest of the audience, I think it was reasonable to have expectations that Weibo Gaming should be the favorites to win, despite you know, this is a new roster being put together, and obviously we're going to give them a little bit of breathing room of being able to come together. But look at the way Hong and Light played together so far. First stage game as a duo, and they've already kind of locked in this very aggressive, forward-thinking mindset.
Yeah, I mean, game number 1, it's looking good for Weibo. I have to say, I'm always going to be the first person to be critical of this organization, right? It's always going to be me. I will put my hands up, right? I am far from Weibo's lawyer. That said, that was an excellent looking, and yes, you can talk about the strength of the EDG lineup and you can go on about all of those kind of things, but still, getting a preliminary look at this Weibo, at the very least for this game number 1, looked great. We saw Light put in a position to really carry the game. You know, after that sort of 15-minute mark, they executed very, very well from that third dragon out. Yes, some questions maybe to be asked from some of those kind of transitional moments after those first couple of dives at best, but then you're really nitpicking and looking for things to really try and drag Weibo down about. I feel like this was generally a pretty well fought game. I think they recognized they were on that timer, and once they recognized, they pulled the trigger. And again, EDG did not really have too many proactive tools, so this is one of those games where it's kind of easy to play when you're the one of the proactive tools and everything is super reactive on the other side, and on top of being reactive is incredibly late game scaling, right?
Right.
Angel was going to need 3 items. I could go on, right? It was going to take a long time for EDG to come online here. Weibo knew that and abused it.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, anytime you are picking a heavy scaling composition, you are begging the other team to say, steamroll us, see what happens, you know? And Weibo Gaming said, bet, let's do it. And, you know, afterwards, CDZ in particular saying, hey guys, can we get some more agency next game? I don't want to be left alone.
Look, I think it's always very easy to criticize the Udyr pick, and trust me, I'll be one of the first to do it as well. That said, there wasn't really much CDZ could do. He was fulfilling a role, and the role was survive the weak side dives, right? That's what you picked the Udyr for. Pick up enough CS, and then hopefully just be, you know, annoying on the side lane, neutralize the side laner, be a frontliner in tanks, right? That's what the Udyr is about. I think for me, a lot of where this game fell apart for EDG was just that third dragon call, right? The game state by all intents and purposes, was kind of fine moving into it. They already had 2 dragons. Drop the third one. Drop the third one. You don't need to try and get to Soul Point. You're not the one that needs to put Weibo under a massive amount of pressure right then and there. Weibo had to do that from minute 1, and they hadn't actually done that through the objectives. So there's this fight right here, right? Allowing Hong to get this engage and then staying committed to this fight, I think was just the big error. Right? I say stay committed. ZDZ couldn't move once he started getting CC.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not sure how did I don't think we're gonna get a replay of it. But however, the mid lane pick also happened onto Assume, right?
Shoot.
That enabled that Baron. We were in the replay, unfortunately. It's just nature of the broadcast. I fear.
Yeah. I to follow up on what you were talking about, I would almost argue that was what really broke EDG's momentum. You know, they only dropped 1 death in the 3rd dragon fight, but the fact that Assume was down both summoner spells and Weibo Gaming wasted no window to capitalize on that opportunity, is EDG then lost everything to be able to keep the game stable for them. And now, as we get ready for game 2, Jamada, I'm curious what you know what, I was gonna hit you up with a question, but you know, I forget that we can just throw it a break, and we'll get ready for the second draft, where we'll determine whether EDG is able to change up some things and have a little more agency in their draft, or if Weibo Gaming is just gonna take a clean 2-0. When we come back, y'all, game 2 is on the way.